pleasure to stand up here and address the body on what is the most important vote we take every year, spending the people's money. And as I'm sure many of you heard before, the budget is the clearest reflection of our values as a legislature and as a state. And citizens expect us to come here and to meet the challenges we face as a state and to set Michigan up to move forward by making the tough decisions about what to fund and what not to fund. And many of you may be unsurprised to hear that I feel that this budget falls short. As many of you know who were here last year and heard me talk about this program, and as those of you who are on appropriations have heard about time and time again, you'll be unsurprised to know that I'm very disappointed that we weren't able to fund the Heat and Eat program this year. This is disappointing because there are 160,000 needy people in the state of Michigan, mostly seniors and disabled people, who are trying to get by on something like $11 or $15 a month in food stamp benefits. And with a very, very small investment of $3.15 million, we could have filled that hole and given those 160,000 people another $75 a month. This would have dramatically improved their lives. It would have brought $140 million in federal money into our state to ring our cash registers and buy food from our farmers. And I want to take this opportunity actually to give a lot of credit to the chairman of the DHHS subcommittee and the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee and all of my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee actually here in this body who supported that amendment here in the House budget. That was in the House budget. But unfortunately, we lost that budget item in negotiations with the Senate. And I felt that it was really important to highlight that here because this was an easy opportunity for us to spend $3 million to leverage $140 million for some of the neediest people here in our state. And, you know, that choice to not spend that $3 million is particularly frustrating when you look at this budget, this $54 billion budget with so many items in it that seem like they are choices that we wouldn't make if we were sitting down at the kitchen table like a family deciding about whether or not to feed hungry people or to make some of these other investments. I mean, I would just point out, for instance, that in this budget, we're spending almost that much money, $2.3 million, just on helicopters for the state police to fly around our state and look for people doing untoward activities in the forests of our state. That $2.3 million, I think, would be better spent on feeding hungry people. We see money hidden in the DHHS budget through creative accounting flimflammery to try to make this Capitol View project work for our Senate colleagues who are looking for new posh office spaces across the lawn from the Capitol. So we've got money in our DHHS budget, TANF money, that could have gone to needy people that we're using to float that project to the next budget to fund new office space for legislators. I'd rather spend that money somewhere else. We've also got choices like the continued privatization of our food service program. We're investing in an additional $1.5 million to keep this project privatized, and that's after the experience we had with Aramark. And I know that we've got a new vendor, we've got a new private food vendor in the prisons, and maybe they're going to do better, but we know that from our last experience with privatized food vendors that was a failed experiment. We generated a whole lot of additional danger for our corrections officers, the brave men and women who are on the front lines every day operating our prisons and trying to keep them safe. We made their job harder by bringing in contraband, by bringing in illegal activity between private food contractors and the prisoners, the type of illegal activity that I won't detail here on the floor because it would break decorum. What we need to do instead is to bring back the state employees to do this work. They can do it cheaper, they can do it better, and they can do it safer, and they can make the situation safer for our state employees and for the inmates. There was a recent report from the University of Michigan that said that the gangs have now taken over the prison food service, and that has made our prisons less safe and more violent. And this was all to save money, and now we find out that we got to pour more money into this hole. We got to pour an extra $1.5 million into this Trinity food service contract that not only makes our prisons less safe for our inmates and our workers, but also makes it harder for us to implement innovative programs that would work to get prisoners back on track when they leave prison. One of the really exciting things we were doing when we had state employees running the prison food service was we were having prisoners grow their own food. This was an amazing way for them to learn a skill, contribute to the cost of their own incarceration, and at the end of it, come out with something of value that they could eat and enjoy, bring some real value and dignity to their lives, which they're going to need when they get on the outside. And while we've privatized prison food service on the inside, we've taken the opposite approach to prisoner reentry on the outside. Michigan used to have a nationally leading evidence-based program called the Michigan Prisoner Reentry Initiative that was reducing recidivism by 35%. This was a program that was saving more money than it was costing, but back in 2011 we dismantled that program. We destroyed it, and we brought those dollars inside the walls of the prison to fund more probation officers. So while we're outsourcing private prisons at great cost, we're insourcing the prisoner reentry in a way that costs just as much but doesn't work. And in this budget, I find it really fascinating that we've allocated an additional $4.6 million for evidence-based practices to reduce recidivism when we are the state that developed the best evidence-based practices to reduce recidivism. And this legislature just a few years ago turned its back on that program. How about we pick that program back up? How about we reinvigorate the program that we knew worked? Finally, one more thing on corrections. We're not doing anything about Huron Valley. I don't know if those of you who haven't been watching the corrections budget very carefully, but we've got a dramatically overcrowded women's prison here in Michigan, and we're doing nothing in this budget to address that. We're also limiting the replacement of voting machines. We took another $5 million out of that. And I'm sure you won't be surprised to know that those of us who represent urban areas are particularly frustrated about that because of the combination that that is going to have with the elimination of straight ticket voting. We tried to have this conversation several months ago when we pointed out that when you're in a city with precincts that have 3,000 voters, that have the maximum number of voters per precinct, sometimes the lines get pretty long. And during the last presidential election, we had lines in our urban areas that went for hours. So how can we call ourselves a fair and equal country where when somebody in one jurisdiction can walk right in and vote with ease and get on with their life and get back to work quickly, whereas in another jurisdiction, people have to wait hours and hours and people are leaving the line because of their childcare needs or their work needs? We need to equalize voting rights for all people here in Michigan, and this budget fails to do that. So, just to close, I want to say that I appreciate the professionalism and the efficiency that the Appropriations Committee was run with. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle were unswervingly civil and good to work with. But I am disappointed that we're making the choices that we're making in this budget. I'm disappointed that we're choosing to invest in office space for senators and police helicopters rather than feeding hungry people. I'm disappointed that we're pulling back our investment in making sure that voting is equally available to everyone. And I know that we can do better.